My fiancé texted, "Keep the pathetic ring. I'm not wearing something so cheap." I replied, "Understood." Then I returned it, got the refund, and sent her a pic of my new gaming PC with one message: "Thanks for the push. Always wanted one of these." She called me hysterical. "Hey Reddit, grab your snacks and strap in. Here's what went down. Name Silas, 32 male. I work as a welder, certified union card, the whole package. I pulled about 78 grand last year with overtime. Not wealthy by any stretch, but comfortable. My truck is paid off. I rent a decent apartment in a solid neighborhood. Good benefits through the union. I've been building towards something stable my whole adult life. The ring took me 16 months to save for. I did it right. Researched diamonds until I knew more about clarity ratings. Visited 4 different jewelers over 2 months. Asked questions. Learned about the 4 C's. Compared settings and band materials. Watched YouTube videos from gemologists explaining what actually matters and what's just marketing nonsense. I was investing in what I thought was our future together. The final pick was a 1.1 carat princess cut diamond. Excellent clarity. Platinum band. Classic and beautiful. The kind of ring she had pointed out in magazines and store windows over the years when we walked past jewelry shops downtown. I paid attention to those moments. Kept mental notes. Made my decision based on what she'd actually shown interest in. The total cost came to $11,000. The jeweler told me it was an excellent choice for the budget and that I clearly knew what I was doing. I planned the proposal for weeks, made reservations a month in advance, requested the corner booth she always said was the best seat, tipped the waiter to give us space after dessert. The night before, I couldn't sleep, kept checking the ring box in my jacket pocket. The actual moment went beautifully. Dinner was perfect. She looked amazing. We talked about our plans for the summer, about visiting her aunt in Colorado, about maybe getting a dog once our lease renewed. Normal couple stuff. Then dessert came and I knew it was time. Her face lit up when I pulled out the box. She covered her mouth with both hands. Said yes before I even finished the question. We stayed at that restaurant for another 2 hours, just talking about our future, wedding locations, honeymoon destinations, whether we wanted kids right away or wait a few years. I drove home that night feeling like I'd finally made it to the next stage of my life. She called her mom from the car before we even got home. I could hear the excitement through the phone. By the time we walked through the apartment door, the ring had been photographed, captioned, and posted across 3 different social media platforms. I was just happy she was happy. Day 3. Monday. Sydney, my fiancée, had brunch with her friends that morning. Taylor and Savannah. I never loved those two. Taylor worked at some boutique real estate firm and acted like she invented the concept of property. Savannah was engaged to a guy who worked in finance and never let anyone forget how much he made. They had been Sydney's friends since college, and something about their energy always felt off. They made everything feel like a competition. I was at work that afternoon doing structural repair on a warehouse loading dock. Hot, sparks flying everywhere kind of work. My phone buzzed during a break. Sydney's message said we need to talk about the ring. I figured maybe she wanted it resized. Didn't think much of it. Called her during my lunch break while sitting in my truck with the AC blasting, picking dried flux off my forearms. That's when things went sideways fast. She told me she had shown the ring to Taylor and Savannah at brunch. Said something in her voice already sounded off, like she was reading from a script someone else wrote for her. Then she dropped the word that changed everything. Embarrassed. She said she was embarrassed. Taylor's boyfriend apparently spent over $20,000 on her ring. Savannah's fiancé went even higher, nearly 25. They had apparently exchanged these looks when Sydney showed them hers. The kind of looks that said more than words ever could. Then Taylor actually asked if this was just the placeholder until the real one came. The placeholder. Like I gave her a party favor until the actual jewelry showed up. According to Sydney, they spent the rest of brunch talking about carats and settings and what a ring really says about how much a man values you. Taylor apparently mentioned that her sister's husband had gone into debt for her ring, because that's what commitment looks like. Savannah added that anyone who really loved their partner would sacrifice for something this important. I sat there in my truck with a cold sandwich in my lap, trying to process what I was hearing. This woman I loved, who cried happy tears 3 days earlier, was telling me my proposal embarrassed her. Not to my face. Over the phone. She said she couldn't show up to brunch again with this ring. Said Taylor had already made a group chat called Wedding Planning Support, and the first messages were passive-aggressive questions about whether Sydney was sure this was what she wanted. Savannah sent her links to jewelry stores that did custom work. Not subtle at all. I didn't say anything for probably 15 seconds. Couldn't think of what to say. She kept going, filling the silence. Said maybe we could return this one and put the money towards something better. She would even cover the difference if we needed to go higher. Said her friends had offered to help her find something more appropriate, more reflective of what she deserved. She wanted me to return the ring I proposed to her with. The ring she posted on Instagram for everyone to see. Return it like a shirt that didn't fit right. I told her I needed to think about it, and hung up. Spent the rest of my shift barely able to focus on the job. One of my coworkers, this guy Vance, who I'd been working with for about 3 years, asked if I was okay. Vance was the kind of guy who said exactly what he was thinking at all times. Consequences be forgotten. Built like a refrigerator with a beard, covered in tattoos, and had zero filter. I gave him the short version. Proposed. She said yes. Her friends said the ring was cheap. Now she wants me to return it. Vance just stared at me for a solid 5 seconds. Then he said, and I quote, "Brother, that's not a fiancé. That's a subscription service you forgot to cancel." I laughed despite everything. First time I'd laughed all day. When I got home that evening, Sydney wasn't there. She was at Taylor's apartment for an emergency girl talk session. About me, presumably. About my inadequate ring and my inadequate understanding of what she deserved. That night around 9 p.m., she sent me the text that ended everything. "Keep the ring. I'm not wearing something so cheap and pathetic." It says everything about how little you actually value me and what we could have been. Taylor was right. A man who really saw my worth wouldn't have put something this embarrassing on my finger. When you grow up and learn what real commitment looks like, we can talk. But I refuse to be humiliated every time I see my friends because you couldn't be bothered to do the absolute bare minimum. The bare minimum. 11 grand and 16 months of saving. Sure. I read it. Let it sink in. Then I replied with one word. Understood. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I drove to the jeweler with the ring box in my jacket pocket. The morning traffic was lighter than usual for a Tuesday. Gave me too much time to think, to replay every conversation, to wonder if there were signs I missed. Red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe we were good. The guy behind the counter recognized me immediately. Smiled when I walked in. Asked how the big moment went. Said his wife loved hearing about successful proposals. I just handed him the box and explained in about 2 sentences. His face went from professional warmth to genuine sympathy. The kind of look you give someone who just got bad news at the doctor's office. Said he sees this more than people realize. That some folks forget what an engagement is actually supposed to represent. Said the ring doesn't make the marriage. The commitment makes the marriage. The jeweler had a 30-day return window as long as it wasn't resized or altered, and we were still inside it. We hadn't resized it yet because I wanted her to wear it for a few days first and see how it felt. Full refund. $11,000 back in my account within 3 business days. No hassle, no judgment. He even shook my hand before I left, told me to take care of myself. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for probably 15 minutes, just staring at nothing. 4 years of my life. Gone over a text message about carrot weight, all those family dinners with her parents where I pretended to care about homeowners association drama, all those holiday gatherings where I tried to fit into their world of vacation photos and status updates, all those conversations about our future that apparently meant nothing compared to what her friends' partners spent. Then I had a thought. I had wanted to build a serious gaming PC for years. Not just a gaming PC, a proper workstation. Something that could handle video editing, 3D modeling, anything I wanted to throw at it. The kind of setup I'd been watching build videos about since I was in my 20s. Every time I had the money saved, something else came up. Her car needed work, emergency dental bill, then saving for the ring. Always later. Always next year. Not anymore. That afternoon, Vance showed up at my apartment unannounced. Said he figured I might be in rough shape and brought food. Takeout containers from this Vietnamese place we both liked. He walked in, looked around at the quiet apartment, and immediately asked where she was. I told him the short version. She took her stuff to Taylor's. I returned the ring this morning. We're done. Vance nodded like he was working through a math problem. Then he asked what I was doing with the money. I told him I was thinking about finally building that PC setup I'd always wanted. His face lit up like Christmas morning. Vance was also into gaming. We'd played together online for years. He immediately started rattling off component recommendations. Said he knew a guy who could get discounted parts through his job at a tech recycler. Said I absolutely needed to go RTX 4080, or what was even the point. Said we could make this thing a beast. We spent the next 3 hours planning the build. Specs. Cases. Cooling solutions. The works. It was genuinely the most engaged I'd felt in days. Something I could actually finish and see results from pulled me out of the downward spiral I'd been heading toward. The final budget came to about 6 grand for the complete setup. Tower, monitors, peripherals, everything. The other 5,000 went straight into my savings account. Emergency fund. Over the next week, parts started arriving. Every package that showed up at my door felt like a small win. The case arrived first, then the motherboard, power supply, graphics card in its own special delivery, because Vance insisted I get the signature required option. He was convinced porch pirates were specifically targeting RTX cards, based on absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Vance came over the following Saturday to help with the build. Showed up with cable management tools and thermal paste like we were doing heart surgery, which honestly felt about right. 5 hours of careful assembly, testing, troubleshooting one RAM stick that didn't seat properly, and finally the moment of truth. It booted. BIOS came up. No smoke. We were good. I took a photo of the completed setup. Monitors glowing. RGB lighting that Vance insisted upon even though I said it was unnecessary. The whole thing looked like something out of a spaceship. Screenshot of the build cost clearly showing the components totaling around 6 grand. Sent both to my now ex-fiancée with a caption. Thanks for the push. Always wanted one of these. Petty? Absolutely. Regret it? Not even a little bit. She didn't respond for 8 hours. Then my phone started buzzing. Her mother called first. Left a voicemail that was just her going off for 2 straight minutes. How dare I humiliate her daughter? The family was devastated. She had already told people about the wedding. Already started making plans. Already bragged to her book club about her daughter's engagement. Now she had to explain why there was suddenly no ring and no wedding. The story they were telling wasn't that her daughter rejected my proposal. It was that I had done something unforgivable that forced her to call things off. The details were fuzzy in their version, but I was definitely the bad guy. Sydney finally texted around midnight. You're actually insane. You bought computer parts with ring money. I can't believe I wasted 4 years on someone this pathetically immature and spiteful. I responded once, it was never your ring. You made that very clear when you called it cheap and embarrassing and refused to wear it. I just reallocated the investment. She called me immature, pathetic, vindictive, said I was punishing her for having standards and trying to humiliate her in front of everyone. I stopped responding after that. Day 10 is when her younger brother reached out. Nolan, 25, still figuring his life out, working at a shipping warehouse while taking community college classes part-time. He was the only one in that family who treated me like a regular person instead of an applicant waiting for approval. We used to play video games together when I was over for family dinners. Actually had real conversations about things that mattered, while the rest of them discussed property values and vacation destinations. His message was simple. Said he wasn't trying to get involved, but thought I should know what was actually happening over there. Sydney was losing it, like actually coming apart. She'd been staying at Taylor's place, and apparently Taylor was feeding her crazier and crazier takes about me, telling her I probably had money hidden somewhere, that the ring was cheap on purpose to test her, that I was some kind of narcissist who set this whole thing up to make her look bad. Meanwhile, Savannah was telling everyone who would listen that she always knew something was off about me, that Sydney deserved so much better and she'd help her find it. Nolan said the group chat had turned into a war room, screenshots being analyzed, my social media being stalked. Someone had found my gaming profile, and they were discussing whether the hours logged proved I was too immature for marriage. I asked Nolan why he was telling me all this. He said because it was insane and someone needed to know the truth. Also, he wanted to know what graphics card I got because he'd seen the picture and needed details immediately. I actually laughed. That same evening, I tested the PC properly for the first time, ran some benchmarks, loaded up a game I hadn't played in years because my old laptop couldn't handle it, sat there for 3 hours, completely absorbed in something that wasn't relationship drama or family politics or anyone else's expectations. Just me and a machine doing exactly what it was designed to do. Vance texted around 11 p.m. asking how the setup was performing. I sent him a screenshot of my frame rates. He responded with a string of fire emojis and asked when we were gaming together. Small wins. Day 11 brought something I genuinely didn't see coming. Taylor showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of a weld when one of the other guys flagged me down and said some woman was asking for me at the entrance gate. I pulled off my helmet and walked over to find Taylor standing outside the fence in heels and a blazer, like she was about to give a TED talk. Couldn't come in, just stood there. She said we needed to have a conversation about how I was handling this situation. Said Sydney was devastated and I was making everything worse with my petty behavior. Said a real man would have apologized by now and started working toward a solution instead of playing video games and ignoring his responsibilities. I reminded her that my responsibilities to Sydney ended when she told me to keep the ring, because it was cheap and embarrassing. Taylor actually laughed, this little condescending chuckle that made my blood pressure spike. Then she said what she really came to say, that Sydney told her how much I made, that she knew I could have afforded better, that I chose to be cheap because I didn't actually want to marry her, that the ring was a test, and Sydney failed it, and now I was punishing her for having standards. I stood there, covered in flux and metal shavings, looking at this woman who had driven 30 minutes to my job site to lecture me about my character. Vance appeared next to me like he'd just spawned there, asked if there was a problem. Taylor looked at him like he was something she'd stepped in. She tried to continue her speech about responsibility and maturity. Vance cut her off. You one of the friends who told my boy here that 11 grand wasn't good enough? Taylor stammered something about context and standards, and what women in their circle expect. Vance nodded like he was actually considering it. Yeah, so my sister got engaged last year. Ring cost $800 because her man had student loans. They're getting married next month. Happiest couple I know. What's your expert take on that? Taylor didn't have an answer. She just turned around and walked back to her car. Watched her drive away without another word. Vance looked at me and shrugged. Some people just can't handle perspective. Day 13 started with something that caught me completely off guard. A co-worker showed me a post that was circulating. Someone had screenshotted my original picture of the PC setup with the caption about the ring money and posted it to some relationship advice group. The comments were split about 60-40. Some people calling me petty and immature, others saying I dodged a bullet and handled it perfectly. But that wasn't the interesting part. Sydney had found the post and responded, with some throwaway she'd created, but her story didn't match reality at all. According to her version, we were basically engaged for years, and I kept stringing her along. When I finally proposed, it was with something deliberately cheap to humiliate her in front of everyone. The ring was apparently so bad that her friends had to break the news to her gently, that it wasn't what someone who actually loved her would have chosen. Then when she tried to have a mature conversation about it, I blew up, dumped her via text, and spent the money on toys to spite her. The comments under her post were almost all on her side. Poor thing. You deserve better. He sounds like a narcissist. Run and don't look back. I showed Vance during lunch. He read through it with this look on his face like he was watching a car crash happen in slow motion. Then he asked if I still had the original texts. The conversation where she told me to keep the ring? I did. He said I should respond to the post with the receipts, set the record straight, let people see what actually happened. The temptation was real, but I told him no. Said getting into it would just make the drama bigger, would turn it into something way more than it needed to be. Said anyone who actually knew me would know the truth, and anyone who believed her version without question wasn't someone whose opinion mattered to me anyway. He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. Then he nodded and said, that was probably the most grown-up thing he'd ever heard me say. I told him not to get used to it. Day 15 is when Nolan reached out again with news that was both interesting and kind of messed up. Sydney had apparently decided that the story wasn't spreading fast enough in her favor. She started a campaign. She was reaching out to everyone we knew as a couple, mutual friends, co-workers of mine she'd met at company events, even my cousin's wife. The story kept changing with each person she talked to. In some versions, I was controlling. In others, I was distant and cold. In one version that Nolan heard secondhand, I had apparently been cheating the entire relationship, and the cheap ring was my subconscious guilt showing. That was new, completely made up but almost impossible to disprove. How do you prove you didn't do something? Nolan said his mom was eating it all up, telling everyone who would listen that she always worried about me, that she'd warned Sydney something was off. I asked Nolan what he thought of all this. He was quiet for a second. Then he said he'd lived in that house for 25 years and watched his mother and sister make up their own versions of reality his entire life. Said the truth was whatever made them look best at any given moment. He asked how the PC was running. I told him I'd finally gotten around to installing everything, and it was running like a dream. He asked if he could come over sometime and check it out. Said he'd been saving for his own build and could use some tips. I told him anytime. Day 17 brought drama I seriously didn't expect. I was halfway through a morning shift when my supervisor called me into the office trailer. Said there was a complaint. Someone had contacted the company through the general inquiry line and claimed I had been harassing a woman. No specifics given, just vague stuff about threatening behavior and making someone feel unsafe. At first, my brain couldn't even make sense of it. Harassing who? What woman? Took me a second to connect the dots. Someone in her circle had tried to make it look like I was dangerous. Textbook move. My supervisor, this guy named Roy, looked at me with this tired expression. Said he knew it was probably garbage, but they had to document it. Company policy. Roy had HR in the room and my union rep sat in with us. Standard procedure for any complaint. I showed them the texts. The original exchange. Her words. My single word response. The complete lack of anything that could even kind of be called harassment. That was the whole investigation. He read through it twice. Then, he leaned back in his chair and said something I'll never forget. Son, I've been married 42 years. Know what my wife's ring cost? $300. 1982 money. She still wears it every day. Never complained once. Know why? Because she married me, not a piece of jewelry. He said he'd mark the complaint as unfounded and move on. But he said I should keep records of everything from here on out, just in case it got worse. I thanked him and went back to work. Day 19 made things worse. Nolan called me directly this time, instead of texting. Said something was going down and I needed to know right now. Sydney had decided to show up at my apartment. Today. In about an hour. With Taylor. They were planning some kind of confrontation or intervention or whatever they were calling it. Nolan had overheard them planning it at his parents' house where Sydney had been staying since moving out of Taylor's. He said his sister had been getting more and more wound up. Not sleeping. Constantly on her phone looking for anything she could find about me. Taylor was making it worse. Feeding her validation. Telling her she needed closure. Telling her she deserved answers. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Vance. Told him what was happening. Asked if he wanted to come over and be a witness. Vance said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Also asked if I wanted him to bring his cousin, who was 6'5", and looked like a nightclub bouncer. I said just him was fine. This didn't need to turn into a whole thing. The knock came at 4:50 p.m. I checked through the peephole. Sydney and Taylor standing in the hallway. Taylor holding her phone like she was ready to record something. I opened the door but didn't let them in. Just stood there blocking the entrance. Vance was sitting on my couch behind me, making sure they could see him. Sydney looked worse than I'd ever seen her. Hair that hadn't been washed. Clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. Nothing like the put-together woman who posted engagement photos 2 weeks ago. Taylor spoke first. Said they were there because Sydney deserved real answers, not cowardly texts and petty social media posts. Said I owed her an explanation for how I'd treated her. I pointed out that I hadn't posted anything on social media. I sent her one picture privately. She's the one who started a whole campaign? Taylor's face twitched. Sydney found her voice. Quiet at first. Asked how I could do this to her. After 4 years. After everything they'd built together. How could I throw it all away over some comments about jewelry? I told her I didn't throw anything away. She did. When she told me to keep the ring because it was cheap. When she said it showed how little I valued her. Those were her words. Her choice. I just went along with what she wanted. Sydney started crying. Said she was upset and her friends were in her head and she didn't mean it like that. Said she loved me. Said she still wanted to fix this. Taylor jumped in. Said I was being cold and playing games. That Sydney had made one mistake when she was stressed, and I was using it as an excuse to hurt her. Vance got up from the couch. Walked over to stand next to me. Looked at Taylor with zero expression on his face. So you spent 3 weeks telling her the ring sucked and now you're surprised she's single? That's a bold strategy. Taylor's face went red. Started sputtering about how this was none of his business. Vance shrugged. Just making an observation. Seems pretty obvious to me. I told Sydney I was sorry she was hurting. Meant it. But there was no way we were going back to how things were. She showed me something I couldn't unsee. Showed me that what her friends thought mattered more than everything I put into this. Showed me that nothing I gave her would ever be enough if someone else had more. She just stared at me, tears still running down her face, looking for something in my expression that wasn't there anymore. I told them both to leave. They did. Taylor tried to get the last word in, something about karma and regret, but the door was already closing. Day 22 brought what I figured was the last big move. Sydney's mother sent me an email. Over 1,000 words of complaints, accusations, and demands. How I had ruined her daughter's entire future. Destroyed what should have been a beautiful joining of families. She actually used that phrase. Joining of families. Like we were royalty, setting up some kind of alliance. The email listed everything I had supposedly done wrong. The not good enough ring, the cruel response to constructive criticism, the humiliating PC purchase, the public display of the receipt, the refusal to engage with attempts to work things out, each item numbered and detailed like evidence in a trial. Then came the money demands. She wanted $2,800 to cover wedding preparations that were already in progress, deposits that couldn't be refunded, consultations that charged fees, planning stuff purchased ahead of time, all supposedly paid before I even proposed and now completely wasted because of my selfishness. $2,800. For a wedding that was never planned. For deposits put down before I even asked the question. I forwarded the email to Nolan and asked if this was for real. He confirmed. Said his mother had been working on it for days. Said she genuinely believed she deserved compensation for dreams that didn't happen. Said this was just how his family operated. I asked Nolan what he thought I should do. He said ignore it completely. Said his mother threatened stuff constantly but never actually followed through. Said the second any real lawyer got involved, she'd disappear because she couldn't handle the embarrassment of having her demands looked at. So that's what I did. Blocked her email, her phone number, every way she could reach me. Shut that door for good. Day 24 brought something I didn't expect. Nolan showed up at my apartment with a laptop bag over his shoulder. Said he had a favor to ask. His building was having internet problems, and he had an online exam for his community college class tomorrow. Asked if he could use my connection to take the test. I let him in. He sat up at my kitchen table while I messed around on my PC. Halfway through studying, he looked up and said something that stuck with me. You know my sister's gonna be fine, right? She'll turn this whole thing into a story where she's the victim who escaped a bad relationship. Probably get sympathy dates out of it for years. She's been running this place since high school. I asked what he meant. He explained that every relationship she'd ever been in ended with her as the one who got wronged. Every single time. The story always got rewritten until she was blameless and the other person was the bad guy. Said I was just the latest episode in a show she'd been producing her whole life. I asked why he stayed connected to all of it. He shrugged. Said she was still his sister. Said family was complicated. Said he loved her even when she made it hard. But he also wasn't going to pretend things happened differently, just to protect her feelings. He went back to studying. Having someone from her world actually acknowledge what was true made the whole thing feel a little less crazy. 2 days after that, something good happened at work. Roy, my supervisor, pulled me aside briefly. Said the complaint thing had been officially closed. No follow-up. No additional claims. Looked like it was exactly what he thought. Just noise. He also mentioned, real casual, that whoever filed the complaint should probably learn that making false accusations to employers can get you in legal trouble. Said it like it was no big deal. But the message was clear. I thanked him. He just nodded and went back to his paperwork. Later that shift, Vance pulled me aside during a break, looking like he had important intel to deliver. Said he had news. Said he'd been doing some casual information gathering. I told him I hadn't asked for that. He said that didn't matter. Said friends look out for friends. Said he'd heard through some people we both knew that Sydney had started dating again. Already. 3 weeks after our engagement fell apart. Some guy Taylor introduced her to. Financed something. Good money. Nice car. I waited for the part where this was supposed to bother me. Vance watched my face for a reaction. Got nothing. Looked almost bummed about it. I told him I genuinely hoped she found what she was looking for. Said I meant it. Said whatever she needed to be happy, I hoped she got it. Just not from me. He stared at me for a long second. Then he nodded. I told him I was honestly okay. Said the hard part wasn't losing her. It was losing the future I'd pictured. But that future was built on a version of her that wasn't real. Better to find out now than 10 years and 2 kids in. Vance clapped me on the shoulder. Said I was handling this better than most people would. People kept asking if I regret how I handled it. If I was too quick to burn everything down. Some nights, lying in bed alone in an apartment that still had empty spots where her stuff used to be, I wondered. 4 years is a long time. But then I remember that text. The words she chose. That's not love. That's a transaction I failed to complete correctly. Vance and I have been playing online together most evenings now. The new setup handles everything beautifully. Smooth frames, no lag. The kind of experience I'd been wanting for over a decade. We've been working through some co-op games we'd been meaning to try for years, but never had the time or the equipment. Then this happened. Over 1 month since the proposal. I was coming home from work, just parked my truck in the lot, when I saw a car I recognized. Sydney's car. Just sitting there. Engine off. Her in the driver's seat. I thought about walking past, avoiding whatever was about to happen, but I didn't. I walked over to the passenger side, kept some distance, and tapped on the window. She looked startled, like she hadn't expected me to notice. Cracked the window a couple inches. Face tired but calmer than the last time I'd seen her. Less frantic, more worn out. She said she'd been sitting there for 20 minutes trying to decide if she should come up. I asked why she was here. She was quiet for a while. Then she said something I really didn't expect. I screwed up. I know that now. The whole way I handled everything. Taylor and Savannah, they're not my friends. Not really. They just like having someone around to feel better than. I was so worried about impressing people who don't actually care about me that I destroyed the only relationship where someone actually did. I didn't say anything. Just let her talk. She said the new guy didn't work out. Turned out he was more interested in having arm candy than actually connecting with someone. Said Taylor introduced them specifically because he made good money, and it would prove Sydney could do better than me. Said the whole thing lasted 1 week before she realized she was just putting on a show again, playing a part in someone else's story. She said she wasn't asking me to take her back. Said she knew that ship had sailed, but she needed me to know that she got it now, that she saw what she did, that she was genuinely sorry for how it ended. I stood there, listening to someone I used to love explain how she'd unraveled. Part of me wanted to be cold, to make her feel exactly how I felt when I read that text, to twist the knife because I figured I'd earned it, but most of me was just tired of all of it. I told her I appreciated her saying that, said I hoped she figured out what she actually wanted instead of what other people told her she should want. She nodded, started tearing up. She asked if I'd ever think about trying again. I told her no. Said I wished her well, but some things are just done. She accepted it. Didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded and said she understood. I stepped back from her car. She started the engine, gave me one last look. Then she drove away. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner. Then I went upstairs, turned on the PC, sent Vance a message asking if he was around to play something. He responded in 30 seconds, said he'd been waiting all day, asked what took so long. I told him I ran into my past in the parking lot, said it was handled now. He asked if I was ready to get destroyed at the game we'd been playing because he'd apparently been practicing while I was out having deep moments. I told him those were bold words from someone with his track record. The game loaded. We played until midnight. Some people would look at my situation and call it a loss. I'm starting to think it might be the best trade I ever made. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.